Here's a story about Rabbi Moshe Mizlesh. Moshe Mizlesh, he was an opposer of the Rebbe, first Rebbe of Chabad. And it ended up, because of things that happened, he became a very big Chassid of the Rebbe, which I'll tell that story about how he became a follower later. But I want to tell another story. Here I read in a book that the day that he passed away was on the 24th day of Menachem of Av, a month of Av. So here's the story. He was a tremendously talented person. Tremendously talented person. And he knew a lot of languages. And he became a follower of the first Rebbe of Chabad. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. Okay, good. Why not? The story was that the Gaon of Vilna, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, Elijah of Vilna, that he was a tremendously amazing Torah scholar, holy person. And he didn't stop learning. He learned constantly, and he knew the whole Torah back and forth and everything. And he heard about what the Rebbe, he became a big opposer of Chabad Hasidus, big opposer of Chabad Hasidut. And the Rebbe wanted to meet with him, and he refused. His mother made him swear that he wouldn't. That's itself is a long, very painful story. But in any case, he sent 10 pupils to Berlin. The motivation for this is I heard two different versions why, and I'll tell you those in a minute. He sent 10 pupils. Some people say he sent 10 minyanim. He sent 100 of his pupils. Now, his pupils were tremendous Talmud scholars. They were tremendously genius people. And they knew ideas of Kabbalah also. The Gaon of Vilna, he wrote, someone told me he wrote more books on explaining Kabbalah than he did on regular, the regular Talmud and things like that. I don't know if it's true, but he wrote a lot of books on Kabbalah. So they all went, and all of them they left Judaism. All of them. They all left Judaism. The reason he sent them was, according to one opinion, was to find out what's wrong, where's the weak part, in order to defeat it. Another reason that he sent them, another version I heard, was he sent them so that they should learn secular knowledge and they could come back with more secular knowledge. And and with that they could defeat. They could come back with more secular knowledge, and with that they could know how to serve God better. Right? They know how. So one reason was to defeat the what's called the maskilim, the enlightened, so to speak, Jews, and the other one was to just use their knowledge in order to serve God better. Whatever reason it was, they went there, and they underestimated the draw of secular knowledge, and they overestimated their ability to resist it, and they all became non-religious, except for two. There were only two that held on. One of them was this Rabbi Moshe Mizlesh that I'm going to tell you about, and the other one was a fellow called Fagin. So I'll tell you the story about this Fagin first, and then I'll tell you the story about Moshe Mizlesh. So both of them went to the Rebbe. They heard about the first Rebbe of Chabad. So they went to him, and Rabbi Moses Mizlesh, he immediately became enamored of the Rebbe and his wisdom and everything, and he became a Chassid. But the other one, this Fagin, he also became a Chassid, but he had big doubts. And once they were standing in a speech that the Rebbe was giving, And the Rebbe said something about one of the secrets of washing hands. And this Moshe, this Fagin, he had a slight smirk on his face. And the Rebbe said afterwards, I see that you have a little worm inside of his soul. And so he he went to him and he said, listen, you're a businessman. This fellow Fagin, he was a businessman. So the next time you have a business deal to go, is do me a favor and go to Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin. Pay him a visit. So he said, okay. So he went to this on his way, his journey. So he went to Shlomo of Karlin, and he said, I was sent here by the first Rebbe of Chabad. And they said, okay, wait right outside of his door. He waited outside of his door, and he heard that inside of the room, Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin was pacing back and forth in the room, feverishly talking to himself, and occasionally like a chair would get knocked over. He didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly the door opened up to Rabbi Moshe, to Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin's room, and he looked out and his eyes were like fire, blaze, and the holiness just radiated from his face. And he looked at this fellow Fagin, and he said, maybe after all, God does exist. Tomer fart alts is frana ebishter. Maybe God does exist. And he closed the door. And this repeated itself 2 more times. He was walking around, pacing around, and he opened the door up again with this fiery look on his face, and he said, listen, maybe after all, God does exist. And he closed the door. And it happened the third time. The third time it happened, this fellow Fagin stood up and ran away. And he eventually left Judaism. And he became a big minister in the Russian government, by the Tsar, a big minister. He was like the minister of internal affairs or something like that. So it happened after the first Rebbe of Chabad, after the Alter Rebbe, when he passed away. So he was buried in a place called Hadich. He was buried, and the Russian government, the Tsar, decided that he wanted to make a big road right through where the Rebbe was, which meant that they would just uproot all of the graves and just throw them, the bodies somewhere else. So they told Moshe Mizlesh that he should go to the minister, and that the minister was this fellow Fagin. That's who he was. And that he should go and he should try to convince him. So he didn't know really what he should do. Should he go? No choice. He left Judaism. Now, this fellow Fagin was a big genius, and he knew all the reasons why Judaism was true. At least he knew what, all the reasons Judaism had to offer, the arguments, and nevertheless he left everything. Okay, so he went there, this Moshe Mizlesh, and he got into the room where this Fagin was, and as soon as he came in, they recognized one another. Fagin held himself very austere, like very angry, and he rang a little bell, and he came in a servant, he whispered something to him. The servant came in with a tray covered over, and he put it down in front of him. And this Moshe Mizlesh said, I hope it's not, he's going to try to force me to eat not kosher food. Who knows what he wants to do? And he pulled it open, took off the cover, and there was a bottle of vodka and pickles. And he said, 2 cups. And he said, let's make up for Bringman. We'll make up for Bringman. And they sat and they made l'chaim a few times, and they sang a few songs. And he said, what do you want? Said, this road. He took out a big map, said, where are the roads supposed to go? He showed where the road is supposed to go, took out an eraser, erased the part around Haddish, made the road go around that, said, and that's it. So he said, I want you to know, this Fagin said, I want you to know that when I went to Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin, I had pretty much already made my mind up that I'm going to leave Judaism. There was just, nothing in it for me. I wanted to be a big big shot, a big manager, a big rich person, a big important person, and I made it. And he said, but that I went to this Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin, and he said, maybe there is, after all, a God. It echoes in my mind. I can't get it out of my mind. Maybe, after all, there is God. I'm always thinking. So they asked the question, one second, why did the Rebbe have to send them to Shlomo Karlin to say that? Why didn't the Rebbe say? So he said the answer is because the Rebbe could not say maybe there's God. By the Rebbe, there was no maybe it was God. At least that's the answer that was given. The story that I wanted to tell was when the end of the Alter Rebbe's life. This was before the story that I just told. The story I just told was after the Rebbe passed away. At the end of the Rebbe's life, so he ran away from Napoleon because he fought a big battle against Napoleon. And when Napoleon started conquering Russia, he came to Liozna, that's where the Alter Rebbe was, the first Rebbe was. And the first thing he did when he got there was to send soldiers to the Alter Rebbe's house to get something of his, because Napoleon was a big sorcerer. And he knew that if he had any possession of the Rebbe, that he could make spiritual troubles for him. And the Rebbe was very afraid of him, very afraid. In fact, the Alter Rebbe was so afraid of him to the degree that he actually sent one of his Chassidim, or he sent soldiers back to his house to burn his house down. To burn his house down so that Napoleon, he knew Napoleon was going to come and try to get something, to burn his house down so that Napoleon wouldn't get his hands on anything. Okay. But before that, before Napoleon attacked and he ran away, the first Rebbe of Chabad sent Moshe Mizlesh to spy on Napoleon. Now, Napoleon, all the religious Jews loved Napoleon. They were all in favor of Napoleon. Napoleon came to knock down the Tsar, to control the church. Everyone was going to have equality and fraternity and liberty and whatever. Everything was going to be equal and free, and everyone was for Napoleon, except for the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was totally against. He said, if Napoleon wins, it'll raise up the glory of the Jewish people physically, but spiritually it's going to be a catastrophe. So he sent this Moses Mizlesh to spy. Now, Napoleon didn't suspect that a religious Jew would be against him. All the religious Jews were for him. So this Moshe Mizlesh sat there, and he was a translator or something like that. He was a translator because Napoleon was fighting against Napoleon was fighting against the Russians. So he sent there to translate things, but really he listened and he heard all the plans and everything, and he really came back and gave information about where there was ammunition storehouses, where they stored their ammunition. And because of that, he gave information to the Tsar, and he destroyed a lot of Napoleon's ammunition caches that he was, and to the degree that he helped the Tsar, that the Tsar made the Alter Rebbe, it said, an honorable citizen for all generations. In other words, he wrote a letter that could be given to the Alter Rebbe, gave it to his son, and that was given over to his grandson, etc. That they were an honorable citizen for all generations. Okay, that's now the story. One day, Napoleon came into the war room where Moses Mizlesh was sitting and translating. And everybody stood to attention. Everyone was tremendously afraid of Napoleon. Napoleon, every word that came out of his mouth was exact. Every decision he made was precise. In the beginning, he won battles that were simply superhuman. Everyone was afraid of Napoleon. Napoleon came into the room, and he looked at Moses Mizlesh, and he said, "You are a spy." And he put his hand on Moses Mizlesh's heart to see if it beat fast, if he was afraid. And it didn't. It didn't beat fast. So he said to Moses Mizlesh, "Okay, you're all right, but get out. I don't want to see you anymore." And he evicted him. So he went and he told the Alter Rebbe what happened. And the Alter Rebbe asked him, "How did you do it?" He said, "You taught us that the head controls the heart. If my heart can be controlled by my head, when my heart is obsessed with my selfish impulses, if I can control the selfish impulses of my heart, then for sure I can control the fear against Napoleon." So the idea, like we just finished learning, that's called Kabbalat Ol, accepting the yoke. Do what the Rebbe says, don't do what you want. The Rebbe says you should not be afraid of anything in the world. I'm not afraid. As we'll learn, God willing, tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming. And tomorrow we'll meet again at 8:15.